Hey everybody, it's Angie from Little Dumplings Nursery. Give me a minute while I'm getting set up here. I'm trying to get a Chromebook set in front of me for a monitor so I can see when and if anybody logs on. And so I can also get an idea of what's happening on the screen. Let's see. So the lighting still looks a little orange here, and it's not orange in the workspace where I'm working, but on the video it is, and I'm probably not going to be able to fix that because I need to be able to have a decent viewpoint of what I'm painting. So I guess it's just gonna have to be what it is. Okay, so nobody's here right now, and that's fine. Right now, what I'm doing, I've got this little head that I've been working on. This is a silicone cuddle head called Christy, and I rinsed her off real good with water today, just plain water, to rinse off any dust that may have settled on her, even though I kept her covered overnight since the last painting. And now I'm wiping her down with just a little alcohol to evaporate the water and also further aid in removing anything that may have settled on her. You won't see me on the video other than you'll see my hand, but you won't see my face because I'm trying to show you just what I'm doing. So I was a little, I've debated whether or not to do this for quite a while now. I've had a lot of people to ask me about letting you watch me paint silicone. I'm just picking off little bits right now that came off of the wedge. I've had a lot of people ask me a lot of questions about that, and I've always been hesitant because I don't want anybody to think that I'm in any way implying that I'm an expert. I am not. I'm not a novice at painting silicone. I would put myself at the intermediate level. Hey there. Benham D. Amaya. Hope I'm saying that right. Thanks for joining me. Anyway, so I've been painting silicone, dabbling in silicone off and on since 2013. When I started painting silicone, we were painting the EcoFlex 20 and 30 babies that were firmer. I still have a couple in my crib over there that I painted back then that are still in my collection. They still look great. And so I'll pick it up and lay it down and pick it up and lay it down over the years. I have a love-hate relationship with silicone. I love it while I'm painting it. I hate it when I'm matting it. And I hate it if I run into any problems, as anybody would. Today, what I'm doing is I'm just going to let you watch me while I paint, and I'm just going to chatter. You may find this interesting. You may find this boring. We'll see what people think after they view it. And what you're seeing me, hello, Marcelita. What you're seeing me doing right now is just prepping it. I've got a little tweezers here. I'm picking off any lint that got on it. I have a little fuzz piece there. There's something about painting silicone that seems like when you start working on it that the fuzz and lint factor just rains down from the sky, like comes from nowhere. And you're constantly having to deal with that. So that's something you have to be real aware of. So I am not a recipe painter. I am a paint by my artistic expression painting at painting. So if you were to ask me to tell you how many drops of this did you use, how much of that did you use, Hello, Marino. If you were to ask me, to tell you an exact recipe, I can't. Because I do it by as I go. I'm one of these people that paints the way that your grandma might have cooked, where it's like she knows when she looks at something that she needs to add a little more um, cooking baking powder, or she knows when she dumps that in if it's 3 tablespoons or 2 or 1. Um, that's how I paint, and so I have a hard time. I used to teach air dry painting classes for years, and I have a hard time teaching the way people want to learn. Y'all excuse me, I'm gonna have to drink some while I talk because I have allergies. I have this tickly cough that comes and goes, and this time of year it's really bad. Anyway, so I don't even remember what I was saying, but anyway, so I'm just going to share with you some observations and some of the things I've got. And I have taken a class from Susan Gibbs that I took about 3 years ago, I think it was. I also, when I first started painting silicone in 2013, Debbie Henshaw, They Never Grow Up Nursery, was my mentor. And she gave me some one-on-one via the internet live video lessons. And I learned a lot from her. Excuse me. I learned a lot from her. And then some things I've just had to figure out by trial and error. So if you're new to silicone and you're wanting to know exact measurements and exact what to do here and there, I highly recommend you either take an online class like from Susan Gibbs, or you go to one of the doll shows and take one of the classes there. Susan teaches them. There's other people that don't forgive me. I don't mean to exclude anybody, but no, right off the top of my head, I'm having a hard time with names. But if you really want the exact things, that's a way to go. Goodness, excuse me. When I start talking, it gets worse. But to say that there are some things about silicone I've observed over the years, and some things I've gleaned from different people. These are the kind of things I'm going to talk about, and then you can just watch me as I go here. So I've got some colors here that I have pre-mixed. That's kind of a raspberry color. That's a yellow ochre. That's a olive purple. That's a really dark green. I didn't intend for it to come out that dark, but I've been using it as a base, and I'll pull some out and change it by adding yellow or whatever I want to it. This is a warm red that is like a Genesis red. The pigments that I have used in my paint are the Silk Pigs from Psycho Paints. From Smooth On. I use the Smooth On Psycho Paint. I have one pigment in here that is from Silicone Art Materials, and it is a coffee color that I've used for some hair painting at times, or eyebrows. And I've also used it a little bit like as a very thinned out color mixed with some yellow and or red or whatever to make a skin tone that if I wanted to add some darker or brown or whatever warmth to my skin tone. I actually did that on this baby. So this baby started out, if you look underneath, and I'm just going to say going into this, a lot of people recommend wearing gloves. I do have all vinyl gloves. I started out using all vinyl gloves from the beauty supply store, and they quit carrying them, and I recently got some from the Great Value ones from Walmart. These have been tested, and I've not have any inhibition problems with them, but I do find that I hate wearing them. I hate wearing gloves, so I don't use gloves a lot, but I will right now. I'll just put a little bit on here to lay this head up where you can see it. I wanted you to see underneath the base. If you look at the neck, that's your base color of your silicone. It's a very peach colored silicone. And she's right now lending a very peach color overall. Like I said on my video, she looks very orange. She does not in person. I don't have any professional lighting in here right now. All I have is some bright lights that I have up so I can see the paint. So this is not a professional video. I've got my phone camera going here, so just know that. But anyway, I always recommend that you start first looking at your base silicone color and decide what your base color is. Is it warm? Is it I've seen everything that varied from what I call a gray. I think they call it olive tone, but it looks gray to me. A grayish olive tone um, base. And then there's some that are peachy colored, and then there are some that are very vanilla. So when you look at your base, like this one's a very warm base, I know that for a warm base, I'm going to use cool colors. So that's how I work, and I mix up colors that are cooler to work with. This one is a warm color. If I have one of the grayer bases, which I have a little mini over there I've been working on that does, I will mix up the warmer red here, and I will use that to warm it up. And so I don't, that's one of those things you've got to learn a feel for. So that's what I do. And then I just kind of paint as I go. That's why I told you before, I can't just say this is my exact palette, this is my exact mixture formula recipe, do it this way, because it's going to vary from silicone pour to silicone pour, and it's going to vary from doll to doll as I go along. So right now, this baby is a little more peachy than I would like her. She warmed up as I was painting her. I kind of was toying with the idea of leaning towards an olive skin tone with her, and I still may or may not. I'm just kind of letting it speak to me as we go as to what she's going to be. These little straws I've got in her mouth are to hold her mouth open so that they don't, in the corner, paint doesn't pool and seal it shut. And so I do ask, I'm looking at the comments right now, I'll go back and edit, but I do ask that you all, I don't mind your comments, but please don't use profane language in the comments. I just appreciate that. Thank you. So I'm going to start with this one. I think what I want to do, because she's looking a little warm and I want to give her just a little more overall color, I'm going to try using some of my eyelid purple color and giving her just a little bit of a purplish tint. The purple is a cool color, and that will help to add a little depth to her skin tone and to also give it some coolness added back in. So I start with my palette, and then I use a lot of disposable brushes is what I like to use. And I get them, I do get these little brushes off Amazon. They're the little makeup brushes that people use for makeup classes and whatnot. Now, anytime you order any kind of supplies, no matter what it is, where you get it from, what you're using it for, you want to test it before you ever use it on a doll. And the way you test it is you mix up some Part A and Part B silicone, and then you take whatever it is you want to test, and you either put a dollop of that on top of it, like if it was a sponge or a glove or something like that, and you leave it to see if it cures. And you'll leave it for about 3 hours, or you can take, if it's a brush, and dip it in that and swirl it around and get a good bit on the brush, and then lay that to the side and see if that cures. So I've got these little skinny ones that I get for my little bitty details, and then I've got these that are like lip, like for putting on lip gloss and whatnot, brushes. And I like to use these for mixing paint. So I use those a lot. I use toothpicks a lot, which I keep in here. And see, all these little things add up. People don't realize that when you're painting silicone, all these little things add up. It's not just a matter of buying the mold, the casting. That in and of itself is an investment. But then you've got to buy your pigments. You've got to buy your silicone Part A and Part B. This is Part B, and this is, I think that's the right one, Part A. And then you have, like I said, your pigments, and then you have your all your little things you paint with, your sponges, your gloves, your disposables, things like that add up. So I've got a little bit of that in there. Now, the way I pre-mix my colors is I mix Part B with my color, and I mix up a base color here, and then I save that. So to that, I'm going to add an equal amount now, Part A, and I keep some Part A in a squirt bottle because it's easier for me to measure it. Now, you can measure yours however you want to. Everybody has their own method. Some people do it with a syringe. Some people put it on a gram scale and actually measure it. Some people eyeball it. I find that if I do this, I just squirt about as much on top of it as what I put on the palette, and it evens out pretty good for me. Like I said, I eyeball things as I go. That seems to work pretty well for me. Might have got a little more Port A in there than I did B, so I'm going to add a little more of this back. And that's how I do it. I just kind of estimate it. So it does, I'm gonna grab that up. But anyway, it does need to be 50-50, but it is a little forgiving, more so than people realize. And then to this, I'm going to add Novox, which I've got a little of it in a squirt bottle here. I've got it where I can actually use it. So I'm going to add a little Novox. I do all my painting with Novox. Some people use another product called OSS thinner, which I have some of that. I like it, the OSS thinner, to clean my brushes. I don't like it to paint with. It's an oilier silicone fluid that takes longer to evaporate out, I find, when you're curing. And so it's not my preference. Some people use a odorless solvent like Mona Lisa, odorless mineral spirits, or any other brand of choice. I don't, because I'm allergic to those. So I'm going to thin this on down because I'm wanting to put just a thin layer on here. So I'm going to thin it on down till it's, the class that I took online from Susan Gibbs, she talks about bringing hers down to orange juice consistency. And that's probably a little bit thinner than I intended to go, but it'll be all right. I'm going to let it, as it sits and you start working with it, that thinner evaporates out and it also starts to cure. So you only have about 10 to 15 minutes working time with your paint. And then I've got different kinds of sponges. You can use plucked, let me see if I've got one here. You can use a wedge that you've plucked. You can use, I've got a wedge here that I've plucked actually somewhere. I'm trying to get to it. And I've cleaned these and reused them. You can reuse them in silicone. They get harder, but you can that's got a piece of fuzz on it. You can reuse them. So that's a plucked wedge. You want to test all your wedges when you buy them to make sure that, put a dollop of silicone on it and make sure it's going to cure. I've also used little cut up pieces of horse sponges called Equest horse sponges. So for this one, I'm just wanting to get a light all over model. And so I'm going to use this makeup wedge that I already have plucked, but I'm going to make sure I've gotten all the fuzz off of it first. Because you do not want to be introducing any fudge to your baby. I do not know how that got on there. There we go. I think I'm going to take a little Novox and squirt it across there and clean it off too. So, a couple of things about when you're painting with silicone and with these. I'm going to tell you that coming from the air dry and the Genesis community, and more so the Genesis community is this way, I was a pouncer. Pounce, 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 pounce. With silicone, you can pounce some, but you've got to be careful because you can leave uneven hills and valleys doing that. And so if you do, and you will, then you'll want to go back over them either again or with a wedge, like a plain wedge, to kind of settle that down some. And that even still can give you some, if you don't get them all just settled quite, you can get some texture to your baby. And there's a couple of different schools of thought about texture. I think the prevailing desire nowadays of people is they want butter smooth babies that feel so totally smooth with no texture. I know that when I was originally getting into this painting silicone, that my mentor was like saying that she liked texture because she felt like it gave it more depth, and that her baby's always had some texture. And I tend to be in the middle of that. Mine do sometimes too. So I tell people, you got to think about two things. Your silicone is not a totally smooth substance to begin with, because it's poured It's a medium that can have little uneven spots in it, or little pits, or little dimples, or whatever. Sometimes your creases come out more crisp and clear and distinct on some pores, more so and some less, depending on how long that mold's been being used. And so paint, as you're putting new layers of silicone paint on top of it, which is basically laminating more paint on top of what's already there, you're going to be adding more texture to that. So it can accentuate what's already there. And so that is another factor you have to consider. There's just a lot of factors there when it comes to the texture of the baby. I'm trying to find me a... So my wedges, when you get your wedges, a lot of them have those little ridges in them, and I cut that off so that it's smooth. So this, as you can see right now, looks pretty blotchy, but it also is not. It's leaving little globs behind that will dry and leave little raised up places. So I'm just going to go over it and pounce that down, or not pounce, press that down is probably a better word. So that's what I'm doing there. And that's all I'm going to do is keep working on that baby, doing that all across. Some people don't paint the top of their heads if they're rooting. I'm one that even I don't root my babies anymore because I have nerve damage in my shoulders, my neck, that's causing problems in my shoulders and my arms. But if I were to root it, I still was always one that when I was rooting, I wanted every inch of my baby painted. And that's just my preference. So I still do it that way because that's the way I always did it. But now that I'm selling my babies bald so that people can then afford them more so, or go have them rooted elsewhere, or root them themselves. So yes, I definitely would be painting the top of the head more now. So a couple of observations. Let's just talk while I'm painting. Let's just talk about silicone in general. A lot of people nowadays are wanting to get into silicone. I think people see things like the Bountiful Baby has come out with the more affordable silicone kits, or they see kits or heads, cuddle heads that are sold as boo-boo heads that they can get more affordable, that kind of thing. And the idea is, oh, well, if I get this and I get the supplies, then I can learn how to paint silicone and I can make myself a baby a lot more affordable than I could go buy one. And so I think a lot of people get into it that way. Sometimes people just really genuinely want to learn how to paint silicone, and they get into it for that reason, and hope that they'll be able to get good enough to sell them one day. And then I think sometimes, it's all of the above. But having been a reborn artist since 2004, and having done this, starting with Behringer dolls in vinyl years ago, and doing that, moving from that to kits, and then moving from that to silicone, and moving from silicone to the silicone that is now the super soft silicone, which I don't paint super soft. I have painted softer, but not super soft. I have no desire to paint the super soft, and I'll speak as to why in a little bit. But I've seen a lot of things happen, and a lot of changes along the way. And the reality is that silicone is not cheap to buy, no matter what you get. Even if you go somewhere like Bountiful Baby and get a silicone kit, they're going to cost you more than a vinyl kit's going to. And then the second thing is the supplies that you need to get started in it are not cheap. And then the last thing is that there is a learning curve. And so you got to figure that out as you go. And not everybody wants to share their secrets, so to speak. And if you do have people that are willing to teach you the things that you need to know, you're going to have to pay a good amount to take their classes, because they're sharing you their time, they're sharing with you their techniques that they developed along the years. So you can't expect that knowledge to just be free. So I'm saying all this to say it's not something you just take lightly and get into cheaply. And then once you get into it, you may be one of these that hits a home run right out the gate, and your baby may turn out wonderful, and you may not have any problems with it at all. But 9 times out of 10, because you have a learning curve, there are going to be things that you didn't do as well as you would have liked to have done, and it's not going to be a perfect baby. So you have to be willing to accept that you are making a big investment in something that is not going to give an immediate return, whether it be monetary or you having a baby that looks like something you saw on the internet. And this is the thing I see with people is that a lot of people, not everybody, is they'll buy this, they'll get into it, they'll start doing it, they'll make a baby, and then that baby will not turn out well. And the next thing you know, you see it up on reborns.com or similar websites for sale as a boo-boo baby. And they'll show pictures of it and what the boo-boos are, but you can't always see everything on internet pictures like you can in person. And then you can't always know if the boo-boos have affected the structural soundness of the paint job. Because with silicone, you can have issues with the soundness of the paint job. Anybody can have that. I have had, pray to God not have any anytime soon, but I have had and may still have someday issues. Every silicone you paint is a little different. They are very finicky, and you can easily run into issues along the way. So, it's just the nature of silicone. Whether it be that you let something run because your paint was too thin, whether you had a crease that came out too dark, whether you have maybe you have an area that you accidentally got some inhibition and you have paint that's not curing well. Mom's Silly Channel. Hello, good morning. By the way, we've had, let me stop and say, we've had, I'm normally working today, but outside of my home at my job at the chiropractor, but we've had an ice storm here to hit this weekend and it still hasn't melted off. So the roads are not clear. So we're closed today. So that's why I'm online today for those of you that have wondered or have noticed. But anyway, where I was going with all this is that it's kind of, in my opinion, it's a little, Creative Newborns, Jen. Hey, Jen. It's kind of, in my opinion, a little unrealistic to expect that when you first get into painting silicone that you're going to be able to turn right around and sell what you're painting. You need to make sure that you like I said, you get a good understanding of it. Like I said, my first few silicones I painted, I kept them. And you want to get a good feel for it, and you want to feel confident that what you're painting is going to hold up, and maybe keep your work around, for a long time. Even if you're planning to sell that particular piece, don't sell it right off the bat. Keep it around for a while to see how it's going to do, that kind of thing. And then knowing that to anybody at any time, there could be a problem to occur. I mean, you just can't, you never know. With silicone, and I may not be popular for saying this because, there are those that have been out there painting a long time that have mastered it, that obviously, have gotten to the point now that they don't run into problems on a regular basis. But like I said, I've heard so many stories of people that have ran into issues where they had issues with inhibition or issues with, the paint peeling for this reason or that. And it's almost always user error for the most part. And it can either be a product you introduced, or it can be the way you cured it or didn't cure it, or it can be, it can be so many things. So that's why I say I have a love-hate relationship with silicone, is because when it goes well, it's awesome. But when something goes awry, boy, can it just send you right over the edge with the stress level. And to this day, it's a little nerve-wracking to me when I finish a baby to sell it, because I'm like, I want to make sure it's going to be okay. I want to make sure it looks okay. I want to make sure it's not going to have any issues, that kind of thing. And so you have to know that you've used all the products that you should use that you've used very sound products. Don't go out trying to buy something cheap that somebody said you could use instead of. Um, you want to use things that are made for silicone when it comes to the paints and the paint products and that kind of thing. And you just there's just a lot of variables. Maybe I'm rambling too much. Thank you, Jen. Um, so so those are just things I would like to just kind of discuss and keep out there. And then there's this other thing about, this is the scary part to me, is that when somebody buys a silicone from you, they can take good care of it and might run in and still run into a problem that may have had something to do with the way you painted it, and you've got to make good on it, or they could not properly handle it and run into a problem. So you have that to think about too. There's just so many variables with silicone. So this is why I have been really hesitant to get on here and just say this is how to do it. I'm not saying this is how to do it. I'm saying I'm discussing it. I'm giving you a bird's eye view into what I'm doing. Now, right now, I'm just taking this little brush and stippling right in that area around the nose where it would be thinner, and then I'm going to go back over it with my wedge just to blend in a little of that color I just put on that baby. So this has definitely cooled her down. I like the way she looks better now. Yeah, and I'm just kind of looking her over now to see if there's anything that I put on there that I want to go back over with my other wedge to see if I've got it not blended as well as I wanted to. So this paint, as you can see, this is what I was started with. It's still thin enough to work with, but it's already much thicker than it was to start with because it starts setting up really quick. When your paint starts setting up, and this is why I mix such small amounts, it's best to, when in doubt, to pour it out or set it aside, make sure it cures. You want to set it aside like this is what I was painting out of this morning. I've got it over here to the side to make sure it fully cures in the pot, as they call it, so that it will peel off. If it doesn't cure there, then I know when it does, if it doesn't cure on my baby, I'll know why. If it cured in the pot, but it didn't cure on my baby, then I'll know that I did something, introduced something into that baby that caused inhibition there. So that's the reason why you want to hang on to that. Let's see, I'm gonna put a little color down here. And I am more of a rich color painter, I think. My babies are very rich in color. They can be very blotchy. That's how I paint. Some people paint very smooth, subtle skin tones. Everybody has their own style. There we go. So I'm just kind of going around and just touching up little areas here that I see that I'm like, oh yeah, I want a little bit there. Jen, that's why I don't know if you heard the first part of this, but I said I have a love-hate relationship with silicone. Silicone stresses me out. I'll be the first to tell you. I love it while I'm painting it at this stage, but when it gets ready to matte, that's stressful to me. If I run into a problem, it's stressful to me. I've ran into issues with other silicones, and I've ran into issues with silicones I paid lots of money for the base, and I've ran into issues with silicones that I didn't pay a lot more money for. I've had silicones that I didn't pay much money for paint beautifully, and and I've had silicones I've painted a lot of money for paint beautifully. So you can't say what can or can or cannot happen always, but it can be. I'm a kind of person that, not that my work is perfect, but my mindset is perfectionist mindset. And so when things don't go according to plan for me, it's very stressful. I don't run into those kind of problems with vinyl. So, I do a few silicones every year and I dabble in it every year, but I am much more comfortable with painting vinyl, if that makes sense. And you can't stand the silicone powder. I've tried pretty much all of them. And I mean, when I first started out painting silicone years ago, we were using, I still have a jar of it here, let's see, somewhere. We were using the old Fuse FX powder. Here it is. We were buying this from Fuse FX and using it, and later learned that it's basically powdered sugar. And the funny thing is, the two babies I have over there in the crib that are still looking great were matted with that, and they're still very matte. The only places that I've had any wear on them has been just around the toes or the hands, just very slight wear where I've pulled a sleeper or sleeve or a leg off and wasn't as careful as I should have been and rubbed it. And then I just go over it with some of that. I've got some D3 Creations Just Matte here, which is perfect for dry matting. And I'll go over them with that. But as far as how the matting is held up overall, it's held up very well. But people nowadays don't use that matting powder. It's a little bit harder to use. And you still, it doesn't leave the soft, smooth, silky feeling that you get with the powders nowadays, the silica-based powders. So you would, if you did matte with that, you would still want to go over and dry mat it with the other. But I just happen to have that old jar here from way back when. And I don't know, I just have hung on to it. But it was very difficult to mat with because you had to put your silicone on and make sure it was tacky, let it dry to the point it's tacky, and then you go over it with that, take your brush and dip it in that. Your silicone couldn't be too thick, or your matting powder couldn't be applied too thick, and then you pounced it on, and that was supposed to indent the silicone and mat it down. And if you had either one too thick, you'd wind up with thick, crusty spots on your baby, which every one of us who's ever used that and started out with that has experienced that at some point in time, I think, because it was easy to do. So, yeah. But the matting powders of nowadays are very, very dusty. But they do produce better results. My stressful part is my first clear layer and making sure there's no drips. And then last clear layer as well to seal the paint. And then, of course, matting. Are you talking about your sealing layer that you seal all your work in after you're done? And then, of course, matting layer, I understand. All right, this baby's where I want it right now. When it gets cured, I will eventually go in and work on the mouth. I've just lightly tinted the lips right now, but I'm just waiting till I get this the way I want it, which I think it's pretty much there. I'll probably go back and put a little extra blushing on the cheeks, some warm blush. Like I said, it looks, it doesn't look anything on my video monitor here, anything like it does in person. In person, it's a very, it's darker than my skin tone, and it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's got that dark plum newborn tint to it. All right, I'm going to set her up here. And so I've got plastic buckets that I turn upside down on these heads while they're curing to keep them dust free. And I actually am working on 2 of these heads at the same time. So that's the other thing I was going to talk about. So I have another one, is curing. It is very popular to heat cure silicone, and a lot of people swear by it and do it and love it and have great success with it. I've tried it. It's not my preferred way of curing. I've got my reasons, but I prefer to just keep 2 or 3 babies going at one time, and let them air cure. And it takes about 3 hours to be ready. 2 to 3 hours, depending on. Right now in winter time, it's taking 3 hours. In the summer, it sometimes can cure up in an hour. But right now it's going slow because it's colder. I like painting in the winter from the standpoint of my paint doesn't dry out too fast, and I like matting in the early springs, because I've got several pieces over here painted that I've got to mat, because I go outside on my screen back porch to do it. and because I don't want all that matting powder in my house. And so if I go out when it's cooler, my paint doesn't cure so fast on me. How do you cure it? Does it air? Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So you can. Some people have baked them in like a new wave oven if it's a smaller piece. A lot of people stand and wave the heat guns and do it that way. I just want to show y'all. This is getting tacky now. So I'm just not, I could probably paint a little bit longer with it, but I've got a whole head to do here, so I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to mix up something new. It's better to err on the side of caution than it is to try to use every little scrap, because then if your paint starts getting too tacky, it will not bond to your silicone base as well, and it may peel. I am using a little Novox to clean off this brush. As long as it comes clean and doesn't have little bits on it, and you'll know when it's starting to get build up and time to toss it. But this one I've only used for this one mix, so I can use it again. Yes, I'm coming to Kansas. I've already got my plane ticket. I'm helping Janelle just like I did last couple of years, and I will be there. So I'm going to set that aside and grab another one. So anyway, this one, and I need to wipe her down because I rinsed her this morning as well, and she's still wet. So I'm going to wipe her down with some alcohol on a wedge. Let me get a wedge. So anyway, getting back to the air dry versus heat cure. So silicone paint is an air dry paint. So that's why air dry painters sometimes tend to do a little bit better with it than Genesis painters. But you can do the waving of the gun, and if you take a class from Susan Gibbs, she'll teach you exactly how to do that, what distance to hold it from the baby, how long to do it, and that kind of thing. And you can heat cure each layer as you go and keep painting. The thing that I want to caution people about that, and I've heard different things. I've heard some casters say it's not good to do that. They say that you can run the risk of burning the surface layer of the silicone and not even realizing it, and then what's underneath it is not completely cured, and the baby can have peeling issues later down the road. So that's that school of thought. But then there's, the ones that are successfully doing it are saying that, they're not directing their heat right at the baby. They're waving it around above it, or so many inches and all, so as to create a warm atmosphere around the baby and not directly on it. My thought process is this. From my many years of painting with air dry paints and researching air dry paints, I learned a long time ago that an air dry paint, even like acrylic paints, painting on a canvas, they would tell you could do the same thing with a hair dryer and wave it over that and set it to where it was just dry to the surface, to the touch, so that you could paint another layer without it smearing, but that you had to understand that it was not completely cured all the way through, and it still had to have the same, cure time. And they would caution that if you heated that surface too much, that you could cause that surface to seal itself up so that the moisture of the material underneath it could not evaporate, and the paint would not cure all the way through, and you would have problems with peeling down the road. So knowing that was said about acrylic air dry paint, and knowing that silicone is an air dry paint, to me, in my way of thinking, I would think that the same thing is possibly done, could be possible, is that if you heat it too close, heat it too much, seal it too much on the outside to where the fluids and all on the inside that you've mixed in your paint cannot escape out, that would be bad for it. And maybe, I'm saying maybe, I'm not the expert, but I'm saying maybe that's why some people have had issues with their paint peeling after they use a heat gun. For me, I have used a heat gun to heat up like the mouth or toenails or fingernails to heat up the silicone area so that it's warm, so that when I put the paint on it, it would start setting and not run. I've done that. Or I've come across a mouth with the heat gun for just a minute, or like not even a minute, just a few seconds, just to kind of knock some warm air on it to kind of stop it from running. But then I leave it alone to air dry. I've done that. I have in the past, I have heat set paint on a cuddle head in my new wave oven out on my back porch, and so that I could cure and let the layer, keep painting. But and I felt safer doing it that way because I was not putting my heat directly onto the baby, the surface, like you would waving a gun over it. But I knew that even still, that baby was only surface set, if that makes sense. And I was very careful that I laid that baby aside for many weeks before I matted it and let it air cure on its own in a container with a lid over it. But one time I tried to rush that, I will say, and I ran into some issues, and I realized real quick that paint underneath still wasn't cured all the way through. So in my way of thinking, if you're going to do that, you need to still let that piece lay and air cure for a good long while. Don't rush through that process. But that's me. That's my thoughts on the matter, and my overall preferences are that I would rather not run those kind of risks. So I just prefer to air cure my baby. Hope that makes sense. I tend to get in here and I have trouble saying what I'm thinking, and I talk too much. I'm going to mix a little thinner layer of this for this baby because it had a little more color to start with than the other one. Let me see where I'm at. I'm not an air dry paint queen, but for many years I did do a lot of research in it. And I enjoyed painting with it to a point, but I will tell you, one of the main reasons I went back to Genesis, the absolute main reason being, is I I left Genesis because the odorless mineral spirits made me cough and burned my throat and burned my eyes. And you hear me now coughing, you can see why, because I have such sensitivities. No box doesn't bother me, by the way. It's not the no box making me cough today, but anything that's a chemical, I've got better sense than to work with it a long time. But anyway, what was I saying? So I went from air dry back to Genesis when I found out that I could use the Eco House citrus, extra mild citrus cleaner and thinner to thin my paint. And that's just been wonderful for me. But the reason I was dissatisfied, there was two reasons actually. Was dissatisfied with the air dry. I'm just talking. I'm now. I hope I grabbed part A to put in that baby. I think I did, because my part B is back behind there. Yeah. So the reason I got dissatisfied with air dry painting was that it's a constant battle with the sheen. It's just constantly a battle. And you have a lot of sheen if if you're using not using a lot of products and you're using more water to thin your paint down, then you don't fight the sheen quite as bad, but then you run into the problems of fading down the road, and that can happen. And it's a kind of a toss up there. So I was so nervous about babies fading because I had witnessed babies fade. I had even had a couple 1 year when I first started testing a certain line of paints in the early test stages. I had some problems with the reds fading, and I went back a year later and offered to repaint those babies for these people because it did fade. And it was because I was thinning it with more water at that time, and I later realized that I needed to add more of the products made to the like flow mediums or whatever medium you typically like to use. Some people like the I can't think of the name of it right now, Liquitex Ultra Matte Gel, that one. Add that back to your water. So I just got frustrated with the fact that I if I did everything I could to try to make sure the paint was bound to the vinyl well and not going to fade, then I had a shiny baby to mat down at the end. And I had my own matting recipe where I took the Golden brand Ultra Matte varnish and added just a little bit of the soft touch varnish to it to make it a permanent varnish, and thinned it down with a little water with cornstarch in it. And I was able to come up with a really matte baby. I've got babies over there on my shelf, babies up here that I've matted that way. And that was great. But then we had the COVID shutdown, and the the company, whatever matting agent they were using in the Golden matte varnish, they apparently had trouble getting hold of it, and they discontinued the varnish altogether. And then I never was able to find one that I liked that would work. I mean, Genesis matte varnish worked, and I went back to that. The problem with Genesis matte varnish is that you have to do a lot of pouncing to thin it out and get it on well, and that was when I was having all these problems with my tendons and my neck and all that, and it was giving me a lot of pain. So yeah, I just went round and round with all that, and then I ended up going back to Genesis, trying another thinner that worked for me, being so happy, and then suddenly Genesis announces that they're going kaput. So it was it's been an interesting journey that I have been on. But during all the years that I used the air dry paints, I did do a lot of research. I called companies, I got on the phone with people, I asked questions, and I'm like, can I do this? What will happen if I do this? How do you feel about this on vinyl? I know your product's not made for vinyl, but what if I'm using it on vinyl? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. So I went down that rabbit hole. I really did. And I learned a lot. Yeah, I remember, Jen, you having issues with with your breathing, even with those. And yes, you're right. The airbrush mediums, which is what was my choice, that I liked using because it didn't distort the paint color but it added sheen. So there was that issue there. My favorite airbrush medium to use was the Just Sonja's airbrush. That one makes things a little less shinier, a little less, I can't talk, a little less shiny than the Golden brand does. And you can, I don't know if you've tried it or not done it, but you can add a little of the Ultra Matte gel from Liquitex in with that airbrush thinner in your water to help knock down some of that sheen. So here I'm just pouncing on this, and then I'm going over it with my wedge to kind of soften that out and make sure it's not too raised up so you can see my baby. Like I said, it looks orange on my screen. I hate that. I'm hoping on yours monitor it doesn't, but looking at it on mine, it does. Maybe it's just my color settings. Have I tried yours? This was matte varnish. I did when they first came out with it. And I liked it fine. It wasn't as matte as Genesis was. Nothing to me that I have tried has been that matte. But I know that Esther's paints, like from when I first tried them when they first came out and all her stuff, I think she's tweaked things along the way. So I don't know exactly what her matte varnish is like right now. I know that a lot of people do like it. As far as the heat set matte varnishes go, I liked the Exodus one that they were producing for a while there, and then the formula changed some, and I liked the ones that she sent me tests of to try. And then Bountiful Baby came out with their Gemini matte varnish, and I like it, and that's what I've stuck with because it is easy to apply. It's like a gel. It's easy to apply, and it's kind of reminds me of what Genesis thinning medium used to be like when it came out years ago, when it was more gel like. And I like it. It's not as matte as Genesis matte varnish. In fact, I still have a original jar of original Genesis matte varnish here, and I'm very stingy with it. I only use it on my own babies that I'm keeping, to be honest. But even the Genesis was too matte for me. I'd always have to thin it down a little bit with just a little bit of Genesis thinning medium to make it where it was a good balance, where it didn't look too pasty and didn't have too much rough texture and that kind of thing. So if you like to have just a little bit of healthy glow to your baby, that, but yet it be matte, I feel like that I get that with the Gemini, and it's very much to me about like what I was getting with my air dry that I was mixing myself. Now, as far as matting with the baby, let's get back to talking about silicone for a minute. As far as matting with your silicone, there's a lot of different matting products out there for this as well. So there's the D3 Creations has the Just Matte brand. Silicone Velvet has their brand. Silicone Art Materials has their Sam matting powder. And Bobby Barfoot has one that she produces herself that I don't know if she's got it on her website or not, but she sells it. She was selling it in Kansas, and I got a jar of it from her. And I like it. They all produce a different result. So the most matte of them all is the Just Matte, I think. And it gives that very silky, smooth feel to the vinyl after it's, after your vinyl, I'm sorry, silicone, after you're done. The Silicone Velvet is just a little bit more of a glow to it, a little bit more of I don't want to say sheen as in a shiny baby, but a little bit more sheen to the surface when you use that. And then I was told that Sam was the most, had the most sheen, I guess you'd say, or most glow or whatever of any of them. I haven't tried any of the original Sam matting powder, but I have some of the newest one that, this last one they came out with. Let's see. This one. I have the second version, I guess. That's why it's SPF 2. I've matted just a couple of small things with it to try it. And it's different. It's a little, the powder's just a little different consistency. It almost reminds me, the consistency of the powder, even though I know it's silica powder, almost reminds me more of the old Fuse FX matting powder that was like the sugar base, but I know this one's not sugar base. I'm not saying that at all. But anyway, and so with that one, I found that to get the best results, I had to pounce it a little more and work it kind of like where the others you don't want to pounce them. You want to just have them lightly sprinkled over and lightly applied. So I like them all. I can't say that I dislike any of them. And then the one that Bobby has, I think I've got a little jar here first. It's called Baby Silk. It's somewhere maybe right between D3 and Silicone Velvet. I don't know. I didn't see a huge difference as in, it was very much like the two, it wasn't as dewy is the word I'm looking for. It wasn't as dewy finish as Silicone Velvet. And it may or may not have been quite as matte as D3. It's hard to say for me, but I liked it just fine. I would use any of them. But my favorite overall is the D3 powder. As far as even when I use one of these others, I like to have the D3 powder for a dressing powder, because for dry matting it works. I can brush it on, and I like that silky feel, and it clings really well. But these others do as well. So you can't say that one is overtly better or worse than the other, because there's no worse to any of them, if that makes sense. I think, when I was taking my class from Susan Gibbs, she said to try them all. They all give a little bit different results, and then pick the one you like the best. And I see why she says that, because she's absolutely right. They all give a little bit of different results, and you might, from one baby to another, want a little different result. Like if you're doing a darker skinned baby, you're going to want a matting layer that's a little more dewy, because you're not going to want to mute down the healthy glow of that dark skin tone. Whereas with the Caucasian baby, you do want to mat it a little bit more, because you don't want that shiny baby look, or shiny silicone look that looks unnatural. So yeah, I hope that all made sense. I'm just going in here and filling in the little spots I missed. Just giving this baby a little overall pinky model. Purpley. And also to help cool down break up the warmth of the I keep saying vinyl, of the silicone, and to give it a little bit more texture look. Well, there we go. I don't have any big stork bites on my baby or anything like that. I generally don't do that. I tend to just do like overall. I don't know. I'm weird in that I don't like blemishes. I definitely despise moles on reborn dolls. I just think, generally speaking, babies don't have moles, and so I don't like that kind of stuff. But I know some people do, and if that's your gig, you go for it. How long have we been running here? Does this thing tell me? I don't know. I may have been utterly bored y'all by now. I'm almost done here though, so I'm going to be bringing this to a close. Anybody that's watching that's still with me, if you got any questions, I'll answer them in just a minute. Alrighty. Just toning down a couple of them spots that I'm seeing. I'm going to add a little color to this ear right here. Just going to brush it on just to blend it, to give it a little pink, purpley, whatever. And then I'm going to go back over it with my wedge, tamp it down, because I'm just want to ever so slightly give that a little color. So my goal with these two babies are, when a baby's first born, it has that purple red look. That's kind of what I've got going on here. I kind of wanted to go darker with the other head, but it's funny how that, even though I thought I was going to go a different route with that one, even though I put different colors on it and this one, they kind of have come out looking almost the same. Sometimes you just got to let it be what it is. Oftentimes, I should say. Sometimes what you think you're going to do is not what you wind up with. And then I'm just going to turn this to see if there's anything running or pooling, or that I might want to touch up behind this ear here where it's got a little need for some color. And I'm happy with that. I'm going to put a little color right here at the nose. I tend to like my nose on my babies, the nasal folds or whatever, the outward parts, to be a little bit more reddish purple than the rest of the nose. Alrighty, and I think I see a little spot inside the eye that needs a little color there. And as you're painting, you'll see, you'll notice there's places in the baby that might be a little more or less smooth than others, and that's just the way the silicone pore is, and it's okay. Alrighty, there's number 2. I think we're getting close to being done with these little cuddle babies. They're gonna have cuddle bodies. Alrighty. Let me go back and grab the other one I was working on. Let's see. This one to me on this side is slightly a little more brown, for lack of a better word, than the one on the right. But like I said, on your monitor, if you're seeing what I'm seeing on my monitor, it's not going to look. I'll have to post some pictures or something for you. I see a piece of lint I need to get out. But anyway, this one's a little warmer. Not a lot, but a little. All right, I hope I haven't totally bored y'all to tears. Hope my rambling was not too much. And give me some feedback as to what you think. Is this something you would like to see again? Is it a waste of your time? Would you like to see something similar but different? I'm open to hearing what you all have to say. I'm over here trying to get a piece of lint off. Alrighty. Y'all have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next time.